Hello and welcome to the Intentional Brief, your weekly video update on the one big thing in cybersecurity news for middle market companies, their investors, and management teams. I'm your host, Shay Colson, managing partner at Intentional Cybersecurity, and you can find us online at intentionalcyber.com. Today is Monday, March 2nd, 2026, and the U.S. and Israel are now at war with Iran. As of this recording, there's been very little mention of cyber in terms of this conflict's battle space, which, I have to say I find a bit surprising, given that all three primary actors here, including Iran, have highly advanced cyber capabilities. Perhaps it's the case that we have learned from our Israeli allies to use these capabilities more quietly, or perhaps they simply aren't in play yet. But we're going to look today at some of these instances where the speed with which cyber moves and the speed with which government and regulation move aren't always aligned, and the implications thereof. Today we're going to dig into a good article from last week by the team at Cyberscoop detailing Project Compass, a coordinated operation by Europol that is, quote, supported by 28 countries, including all 5 members of the Five Eyes, and which has resulted in the arrest of 30 perpetrators since the initiative got underway in January of 2025. So for those of you who maybe aren't tracking this threat actor as closely as some of us are, the COM is a loosely coordinated network that targets young and vulnerable minors for exploitation. They work in 3 primary areas, including what they call cyber comm, offline comm, and extortion comm. Project Compass, which is coordinated by the Europol's European Counterterrorism Center, has asserted some very real wins against the comm in the past year, including 4 victims safeguarded, 30 perpetrators arrested, 62 identified and partially identified victims, 179 identified and partially identified perpetrators, and 9 joint awareness raising activities. So while this hasn't unfortunately taken the entire network down, I do think it serves as both an example of successful international coordination, but also as a very real deterrent to current and future criminals or participants in these spaces. This is an important effort at a time when the cost to launch these type of attacks continues to come down, driven by availability of toolkits, AI capabilities, communication amongst these groups, and in the broader context, we're seeing unrest amongst younger populations around the world. Actually, Fast Company had a very good article yesterday on Sunday that came out about how teenage hackers are both on the rise and more dangerous than you would think. One of the frames they use in this piece that I hadn't really seen or considered before is that they call these attackers not only persistent and socially connected, not unlike the COM, but also addicted. There's a difficult dynamic here that's underexplored, but I think is very real in the sense that this deterrent effect needs to be front and center for young people considering this path. I think the escapist nature of these communities, these attacks, these sort of games can be really difficult because the consequences are abstracted away by both screens and distance, and they can lead to some very bad decisions by people whose brains are still fully in development, particularly those parts of decision-making areas in the frontal lobe. I also think this example is a relatively rare win in terms of international collaboration, which has been so hard to come by lately. Finally, I think this puts in stark contrast the pace of justice and law enforcement efforts with the pace of cyber attackers. Those wheels of justice certainly don't turn fast, but they do seem to keep turning, particularly at this international scale. Meanwhile, watch this space, watch your logs, and check in on your kids and their friends. From a fundraising perspective, back to more normal numbers this week, but still strong with more than 17 billion in newly committed capital, more than half of which came from Greenbrier Equity Group, who raised 5.4 billion for their 7th PE fund, and NovaCap, who put up 3.8 billion for their 7th flagship tech buyout fund. A reminder that you can find links to all the articles we covered in the comment section below. You can find back issues and written transcripts of these videos at intentionalcyber.com, and we will see you next week for another edition of the Intentional Brief.